Good evening, everybody. My name is Diana Louise Webb, and I am the author of Last of the Autumn Rain. The book is a psychological thriller, but the underlying theme is the mental health crisis in this country. So hopefully we can all understand that that's happening. Today, what I wanted to talk about, though, is resilience over adversity. The reason that I wrote the book is I had a best friend who committed suicide, and there were signs, and nobody really did anything about it. So we have to be more vigilant to see if you see things that happen. For instance, she was giving away her jewelry. She was talking as if she was going to exit the earth. And I think at that time, mental health is something that people want to just sweep under the rug because it seems to be an embarrassment the same way as abuse. And we need to bring that to the forefront and say that that doesn't happen. The second reason I wrote the book is my ex-boyfriend tried to murder me. I ended up surviving, so it's a situation where I landed on my feet. But when adversity happens to someone, it's not a difference in degree, it's just a difference in kind. And we all have our challenges that we go through. So in the book, the protagonist, it's number one of a trilogy. There's different characters, and at any time in our lifetime, any one of us could be any one of the characters in the book. And in a matter of seconds, your life can change. So then I met a man, and he was really nice. He was into construction, so he had to do the windows in his house, and we were in a place where, of course, it gets cold in the wintertime. So he stayed at my house, and I was staying somewhere else, and he had gotten into drugs and using drugs. And this was back in the early 90s when the Reagan era had just say no to drugs. And I don't know if you know a lot about the federal sentencing guidelines, but there's a case called conspiracy. You don't need any physical evidence to have a conviction for that. So an indictment came down, and I was also named on the indictment, and I had to serve 12 and a half years in federal prison. So whenever I was able to get out, of course, everything changed, because when you're behind all the walls, you get out and the cars have changed, the clothes have changed, and everything has totally different magazines, and it's a relearning process. And what I discovered, which was really interesting over the years, whenever anybody has any problems, life takes on a whole new perspective, and you have to realize that it's how we love in this world and how well we love in this world that matters. Because when you're behind the four walls of a prison and the door doesn't have a door handle to get out, nothing else matters because they take your liberty away. And you get a whole new appreciation for things like gratefulness. And I think that's something the world needs today, too, such as hot water in the shower. I think all of us take that for granted. You take a shower, you say, oh, I got to turn on the hot water. When you're in prison, the water was cold, and there wasn't anything you could do about it. Sometimes you had hot water, and we just take that for granted that that happens. And other people, they have it sometimes worse. Also, you need to exercise patience in life, and that's having patience with not only yourself, but with the elderly, the mentally ill, and other people in your life. I think we have all done things or said things that we didn't mean to say, and then you want grace, so you have to be willing to give grace to others. And you also have to remember that things could always be worse. No matter how bad you have it, there's somebody else that might have it worse. And finally, other people have a perspective. And if you think about it, you think a certain way. And what makes this country such a rich, wonderful place to be is we can all have change in opinion. And what is important, even if you don't understand another person's opinion, to at least respect it in a way that can make you feel good and make them, feel good at the same time, because the world doesn't have a place for violence and hate. Now, what I've found is that journaling is always very helpful. And along with the book today, if you decide you wanted to purchase a book, it comes with a free journal. And journaling can be very, very therapeutic. And in the beginning of the journal, you talk about the foundation of yourself. And that's what made you the person that you are today. That can be your childhood, the different experiences, and that can be good or bad experiences. And even in the worst of an experience, you can hope that you draw something that's going to make you a better person. The second phase is a snapshot of your present life. When you look at what your life is today, who are you? And there's actually three parts of self. It's who you think you are, it's who others think you are, and then deep down inside, it's who you really are. And you want to be the best person that you can be and give the best you can to the world. The third phase is to embrace your inner sunshine. We all have to have self-love, and we all have to know that we are worthy. And no matter what you've done or things that you've gone through, you should never let your past define you. And finally, you want to let your spirit soar. So in essence, for that, you want to be able to go out and give the world 110%. Now that said, there's sometimes you can only give the world 5% or 0%, and it's the same thing in relationships. Relationships don't necessarily have to be equal, but at some point they have to be balanced. But within that balance, sometimes you're not capable of giving anything, and someone does have to give 100%. Or in different other situations, maybe 60-40 or 20-10, and all of that becomes full circle where you want to have an enjoyable life. And if you have something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to, you probably have more than what a lot of people do. So in essence, in conclusion, there's 4 things you should remember. You have to have self-love and forgiveness. And that forgiveness is not only to forgive others, but a lot of people are very, very hard on themselves. So you want to make sure that you forgive yourself. You also want to say, if you see something, say something. There are situations that go on, and that includes when my ex-boyfriend tried to murder me. There were signs, and everybody kept saying, well, someone's going through something. No, if you see something that's off, you need to say something to someone, and don't feel like it's an embarrassment if you're wrong, because you could really avoid a big tragedy. Secondly, or thirdly, ask for help. If you need help in life, there is nothing embarrassing about asking for help and to help others in your family. And family and friends are so important, and you need to make sure that you appreciate your family and your friends. So if you see someone that needs help or you need help yourself, that's what you need to do. You need to seek it or provide it for others. And then finally, you want to live the great life that you're destined to do. You have a dash in life from the beginning until the end, and so you want to definitely make that dash matter. So I want to thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes?
I don't have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for being here.
Okay.
I wish there were more people here because it was fabulous.
Well, if you do have any, thank you very, very much. But if you want to ask anything, no matter how deep it is, I'm happy to answer any questions. Some people ask me about the prison experience, and I had a roommate, and she had murdered someone. And actually, when I first went to prison, it was in Tallahassee, and they didn't really have a women's prison for nonviolent offenders because it was such a long time ago. So you were housed with people that were on death row, and they were in prison for bad crimes. But she had murdered someone, and she opened the cabinet and said, "The cupcakes were screaming, eat me." And I thought, boy, this is going to be one long decade. Okay, the question was I with her the entire time? No, I was not with her the entire time. They take you from prison to prison because they don't want you to get too comfortable in one place or another. And I was actually transferred from Danbury, Connecticut to a camp in Pekin, Illinois when I had a few years left on the sentence. But they send you by yourself. They give you a bus ticket and they tell you, here's some money and you better show up or they're gonna rearrest you. But as I went out of there, I was really like a fish out of water because, again, I'd been in prison 8-9 years. You come out and I saw a cell phone. I thought, well, what is this? So I was on the bus and this woman showed it to me, and I just thought it was just the most interesting thing because I didn't have that when I came in. And then also we stopped at a McDonald's, and all across where the menu was changed and everything moved so fast. And what was so surprising is you see so many people on their cell phones. And before I went in, you actually sat in a cafe, you had a conversation with someone. So it was a distinct culture shock. While I was in Connecticut, sometimes I think God just puts you where you need to be. There was a man on a bridge and he wanted to jump because he lost his wallet, but I was at the bottom. It was a small overpass, so I had, a half hour left, but I climbed up there and we talked for a little bit, and I said, well, I'm self-surrendering to another prison for several years. And he looked at me, and I said, I'm not jumping off the bridge. And we talked for a little bit, and then he reached out his hand, and I held his hand, and he walked down. So I think sometimes there are experiences in your life where maybe God, the universe, they put you in a place where you need to be, and that makes something very, very special. Any other questions? Yes?
Okay, no, you go.
Do you have children?
Questions, do I have children? No, when I got out, I was 40. So I'm 58 now, and I wasn't able to have children, but I did have my eggs frozen, and that is still frozen. I just don't have anybody that it worked out with. I thought the gentleman that tried to kill me was going to be an option, but it wasn't. And the first time he tried, he hired an assassin, but there were two cars. I had an identical car, like exactly parked in the same parking lot as another car, and the person was going after the wrong person. So that was probably traumatic, not just for myself, but for somebody else who becomes the wrong target in a situation. And that does change life forever. And something else, when you have a child or a parent in prison, or someone has alcoholism or a drug habit, it can be anything. Not only does the individual suffer, but the whole family suffers. And if you do go to prison, the entire family does the time right with you. And I was in with so many sad situations. There was one girl, she drove past a school. Her husband had committed suicide, and they added on, 10 extra years to her sentence for passing a school. There's certain rules. But also during that time, I was in with several notorious serial killers, and we talked about their crimes. And the enlightenment was, someone in another conference had asked me, why do people do that? So you would ask, and if you come close to somebody or you help them, and the question was usual, I don't know, I just happened to be what I thought I'd do today. And I was absolutely shocked, because so many people just do something and they just didn't have a reason. It just seemed like today would be a great day to get up and go do something like that. And there was others that you could see how love curdled into hate. They would hate a boyfriend or a husband's new lover or wife. And one girl had someone killed that was 5 girlfriends and wives and significant others before her current one. It wasn't the one before. The one before, it went 5 times back. And then she got, life in prison. And I just thought to myself, I just am really happy and glad and humbled that that's not me or anyone in my family, because that can happen to anyone. You can just snap for some reason. And some of these people, they were okay. I did meet one woman, and she limped and one eye drooped, and her husband had beat her so severely. And one time she didn't have dinner ready, and she had to eat out of a dog food bowl, and he put her head in the toilet. And one day he was laying on the couch, and she just shot him. And she told me, do you blame me? And I'm not there to judge. That's between her, God, and her family. But I told her, I'm not in the position that you were in, and in a particular position, in a particular circumstance with a pattern of facts, I don't know if anybody knows what a person would do. And that's what's interesting about the book. You could be in any one of the particular circumstances that would definitely, you can see yourself in, or you can see yourself as some of the other people. Now, there's also 2 more books. One is called The Butterfly Cometh, and that's 171 stories. And you go through, first you're in Big Bend for some of the stories, and each person that's in the park, a butterfly is listening, and you hear a story, and then you find that you can have some introspection into your life. Then you travel to a animal sanctuary, and each of the animals has a lesson to teach. And at the end, there's some very thought-provoking questions that you can think about, because in a circle like this, you might answer a question in a certain way, but when you're alone, deep down where it really counts, you might answer a different way when you're thinking of situations. And then you go to a horticulture plantation, and there's a lot of flowers, and they will each speak and teach a lesson. And then at the very end, there is a prosthesis location manufacturing, and each of the body parts has a lesson to teach. They talk about the brain, the hand, and it's actually very captivating. So it's Crystal the Butterfly, named after my mom, Crystal Webb. And then the third book is Elf Dust to Excellence. That's a 40-day journey, and those are really hard-hitting modules about your life and what you would do. And I'll give you one example. Let's say that you and your significant other are traveling, and all of a sudden he or she runs a stop sign, and you're sitting in the seat, and you go to court, and the judge says the officer's not here, but you tell us whether or not your significant other was speeding. If the answer is yes, or ran the stop sign, if the answer is yes, it's 1 day in jail and 40 hours of community service. Or you can say no, and the person can walk, and you're under oath. So the question becomes, you're sitting on the stand, and the judge says, did he or she run the stop sign? Now, you don't have to answer that question now, and a lot of people can go anywhere from a range of, oh, I'm going to tell the truth, and they did it, and they're going to have to stay there. Or you can say to yourself, a day in jail in 40 hours? No, they weren't running the stop sign. So there's different questions of how you probe yourself, and again, it's possible to read in the journal. So one of the stories in the Butterfly Cometh is about my mom. She's going to speak to you in a minute. My mother's a child survivor in Nazi Germany. Last week she turned 90. And her name is Crystal Webb. And one of the stories talks about how they almost put my grandfather in a concentration camp. So with that, if there's no more questions, I'll turn. Oh, go ahead, sir.
When you were transferring,
yes,
and they had given you a ticket and told you, did you ever have thoughts of maybe not showing up?
I did not, and I'll tell you why. I knew a girl that did. She did escape. She was in a camp in Alderson, Virginia, and they took off. And Alderson is a small town. And in Alderson, a lot of people escape from the prison. And if you turn in an escapee, you get a free ham. So that's what they give you. Well, she escaped, and it happened to be on a weekend, and there weren't any banks open, and they were stuck, and it was around Christmas, and there were 3 girls, and so they went running through the woods. Well, one girl got hit with a pole that happened to be in a tree, so she got a black eye. So they crawl up a hill, and one girl fell down, and there was a trucker at the bottom, and he went and talked to her, and they're thinking he got his free ham. So she went on, and they ran into 2 guys that were very helpful, and they had a party. So they made up a story that her friend was beat up by her boyfriend because she had the black eye. So they went to the party, and then she said that while they were there, they told them the truth, and the guy said, we'll agree to help you. So they get ready to go, and they're going to take them to another state. Well, then some third man comes in just randomly, and this always happens, and he had to use the restroom, and one of the girls were in there. When he opened the door, he recognized her, so of course he wanted his free ham. So they all got caught, and she came back, and it was an additional 5 years. And I know some people during that time after 9/11, they really couldn't afford to send you on a plane, because one transfer I had, they put you on a plane, and it's similar to Con Air. They have someone with a machine gun on every wing of the plane, and you're handcuffed with a black box and shackles, and everybody, the big joke was, don't move, they might shoot you. So at that time, they took you, but after 9/11, the money ran out, so if you had to go to another place, they just put you on a bus, and you just have to go by yourself. So that girl was a lesson to everybody. You don't want to catch another charge. And I think people have an over-optimism syndrome that you just don't think you're going to get caught. And unfortunately, I am a believer that everybody does. I watch Dateline, and in the end, it seems like the cops aren't as stupid as everybody, thinks that they are, and they're able to find people. So you balance that. But I knew another girl, I think she had 10 years left, and that was a question we asked her. You think about leaving? And I mean, what would you do? You'd have to continuously run your whole life or go to another country. So you just, you stomach it. My first job in the prison, I worked for Unicor, and we made minesweepers for the war. And again, they pay you pennies, and so no other company is going to be able to compete with that. And I was a QC, so you did quality assurance, but there were people that cleaned bathrooms and did everything. And at the end, when you're in a prison camp, it might surprise you there's no fences. And they just say what keeps you there is the threat that they're going to do something else to you. So when I was done, my mother picked me up from the prison, and you go home, but then they put you on what's called supervised release, which was for 5 years, where they have a person breathing over you like a helicopter and watching every move you make, and you have to have a job within 10 days. I got one, but there are a lot of people that couldn't, and if you can't, they put you back in the prison. But sometimes it's hard, there's not a lot of skills. And I met a guy, bless his heart, he robbed a bank, and he got out after 20 years. And he couldn't even make it. And he kept saying, I want to go back. And we all were at a halfway house and said, please don't do that, try. And he couldn't, so he went in a bank, and he had a banana under his shirt. And he held up the bank with a banana. And he told the people, I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings. But when you're on the other end of that and you don't know what it is, it can be very traumatic. So they put him back, and he said at least he was comfortable there. He had health care, and he felt a little bit like, I think in the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where you just get so accustomed. I hate to use the word institutionalized because nobody wants to feel like that, but he got accustomed to it. Anybody else? Yes.
What happened to your sailor?
Pardon me?
What happened to the boyfriend?
Oh, actually, the boyfriend who tried to kill me, he is in prison right now. And after he couldn't do it with the assassin, he tried to do it himself, and he hit me with a baseball bat. I actually have photos. I didn't want to do it during the presentation, but afterwards, if you want to see a picture, I would be happy to show you. And the reason being is this can happen to anyone. And you can be the person that's on the receiving end. It can be a person that's a friend of yours, and maybe you've seen it on TV, or maybe someone else that you personally know. And I do believe that can happen, and some people try to hide any kind of an abusive situation, and then all of a sudden it escalates, and we've all seen it in the news. All of a sudden someone disappears, or they die, and the person just snaps. And I think some people keep going back, and that's why police are a little bit apprehensive, because they say we do all this work and then the person's back together with that individual. And that's where the love comes in, that if you have friends or family or forgiveness or encouragement, or to have some kind of an advocate so that you can say this is not healthy. And one thing, everybody's in a position where you think somebody's going to change. The only thing people change are their clothes and the circle of the style of clothes that goes on, but usually the faults that you'll see, and everybody has faults, so you can't be too picky, but if there's something that's a red flag, it usually magnifies itself in a relationship or in a marriage. But to answer your question, yes, he's in prison. Anything? Yes, sir.
Is there a trait you developed while you were in prison that you find yourself still battling today?
Well, a good trait that I think I developed would be being more humble and having, a sense of humility. And again, that deals with when you see green grass and you're just like so grateful because we just were in concrete and steel. I do have patience, but I do have an intolerance for incompetence of police officers. I'm not to say that I would not obey the law, because I'm a law-abiding citizen, but I saw people in prison that just didn't need to be there. And I realized that they make cases by other prisoners saying, And it happened in my case. They told one person who was serving life without parole, which means you're going to die, and then they take your body, and it's on your paperwork. They'll say out date, and it says death. You know, they take your body, and they're going to go bury it in some prison yard with the warden standing there. So they tell this person, they did tell this man in my case, if you want to testify against Diana, you can walk out of here today free, or you're going to get stuck with your life in prison. And the motive to lie is enormous. So a lot of times these people go around the jails and they try to circulate and get individuals that are going to step up and say things that might not always be true or might be half-truths because they want to make the case. So they center on what they want to do and they go forward. So I think it has made me a little bit skeptical, and it's not just of police officers, it's people in general, because some of the individuals that were in the prison seemed rather normal, and they were on horrendous crimes, and it makes you think, oh, you know, what could somebody do? And in our town, they had a girl, she was at the gas station recently, and somebody came up to her and said, hey, I do yards, here's my business card, and he was well-dressed, nice, and she got in the car, and she goes, I don't know if I need my yard, but I'll take the card. And she's driving down the road, and all of a sudden started to feel very ill, and she looked behind her, and that man was following her with someone else in a car. So she started to lay on the horn and pulled into a driveway, and it turns out he put something on that business card that apparently is like 10 times the strength of a date rape drug. So what the new thing is people come knock on your doors and say, do you need your limbs trimmed? Here's my card. And within seconds, you fall on the floor in a catatonic state, and they can either rape you or they can hurt you in some way. Which brings up another point. A lot of the officers in the prison, and in every prison I was at, they would trade favors for some of the inmates. They would want sexual favors for a stick of gum. And I think they abused their authority. Not all of them, but in every prison I was at, there was at least one. And I think that the selection process maybe for those jobs needs to be a little more stringent. But again, that gives me a reason just to be skeptical of a lot of people. And sometimes it's not warranted, because there was one girl, and her crime she was for, she'd run to somebody's door, claimed her boyfriend was trying to rape or kill her, and the minute the person opened the door and let them in, it was all a ruse. They came in and robbed. So from that, I think to myself, if someone comes banging on the door and they need help, you know, I don't think I would open it. I'd call the police. But what if they needed help and were actually murdered on my front lawn? And you have to balance that. But once you've actually seen it, once you have actually been there, that's what happens, and you know, it changes a lot of things in your thinking process. Anybody else? Okay, with that, I will turn over to my mom. You can step up here, Crystal Webb.
Okay, I don't have to introduce myself that I'm Crystal Webb. I was born in 1935 in a small village in East Prussia named Hügelwalde. In 1944, when the war was on, I turned 9, my sister was 10, a brother was 7, and my little sister was 3. When Hitler ordered that all women with children leave and go westward, because the Soviets, at that time the Russians were called Soviet Union because they were many countries under the dictatorship of Stalin. So as the Russians were approaching, Hitler made sure that a lot of families escape. So he provided trucks with soldiers to come to the houses, and we were loaded up on the trucks and could take anything we wanted with us. And many families, in fact, the majority of the families went along, and some, of course, couldn't. They had big farms and couldn't just leave the cattle and everything. And so my mother also wanted to take a sewing machine with her on an iron rod stand, and also a brand new bicycle from my dad. The soldiers brought everything to the train station in Ortelsburg, where the train moved westward until Pomerania. And of course, during the war now, all able-bodied men were not around. They were all fighting against the Soviets in East Prussia, because East Prussia was closest to the Soviet Union. And my dad also fought, and one day he was recalled to the factory in Königsberg, that is the capital of East Prussia, where he used to be a precision tool maker. So he was called back to maintain and repair the equipment for the war effort. And of course, everything was scarce, including food. So one day, my dad made a joke of a prayer at lunch at work, saying, "Come, dear Goebbels, and be our guest, and give us what you promised us. We don't want to eat margarine and herring. We want to eat what you eat and Mr. Goering." Now, Mr. Goering was number 2 in line. You could always see him standing next to Hitler. And Dr. Goebbels was a propaganda minister whom you could hear on the radio all day long, telling how great Germany was, that we would be winning the war, and every family would have a Volkswagen. Well, the actuality was totally opposite. Everything was bad, and let's see. Yeah, of course, yeah, everything was bad, and we were not allowed to say anything derogatory about the leadership. If we did, we would be hauled off to the concentration camps. And someone, after my dad said that joke as a prayer, someone reported him. So he was called into the office and interrogated at length, and every co-worker was called in separately and questioned about my dad. And my dad tried to minimize the situation by saying, well, the food could be a little better. And the next morning, my dad had a new co-worker who worked with him side by side, and he wore a brand new work uniform. See, in the factories in Germany, they used to have work uniforms. And my dad knew exactly that it was not a worker, which was, so he was from the SS, the secret police. And every day he would start something by saying negative about Hitler or the regime, and my dad knew better not to agree with him, not to say anything at all, just keep his mouth shut. And that went on for quite some time. And one day, as they were standing again together, the worker with my dad, next to a table where there was a big hammer laying on the table, as the worker started to talk negatively about Hitler again, my dad said to him, "You miserable wretch, if you say one more derogatory word about my beloved leader, I will hit you with this hammer over your head." Well, that did it. The next day, the co-worker did not show up, and no one ever saw him again. Thank God. So situations like this, in the extermination of the Jews, the horror of the brutality of the Hitler regime should never be forgotten. That's it. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be willing to
Any
tell
questions
you.
for my mom?
Yes?
So how did you make it to the States from?
To the United States. Well, as I grew up, I had in a business college. I also learned English shorthand, and I was also in England to improve my English language, because when I was working as a shorthand typist in Bremen, Germany, I had to also write letters into English. So I went to England, and then I knew English shorthand. When I came back, there was an installation next to where we lived, and I applied. I sent papers in looking for a job, and I was invited to come and test it. A quick typing test, and then shorthand. The commanding officer dictated a test, and they accepted me, and I met my husband there. Yes. And
When did you come to?
1962, we were still stationed in Blumenthal, where we lived, and then in Bremerhaven, and from there, my husband was forced to go overseas. He was twice in Vietnam and one time in Korea. And while he was there, I always went back to stay with my parents, because I had a little girl, and I wanted my parents to enjoy the little girl. So, yeah, and when he came back, so in 1962, then he came back from Vietnam to the States, and he wrote to me saying that, or called me that I should come to the States. And so I traveled alone with my little girl to the States, and I flew with a military plane, because at first they wanted to send me on military orders by ship, but I was deathly sick when I went to England on a boat, and I would be so sick, so I asked the commanding officer if I could fly instead of by ship. Well, they allowed it, so we flew via Scotland. When we took off after a while after Scotland, all of a sudden the pilot announced, so that was my first flight, the pilot announced that we have minor engine trouble, we have to return. But in the meantime, since my little girl was the only little girl in the plane, there were mainly soldiers and women on the plane. So the navigator came up to my girl and said, "Come on, little girl, I show you the cockpit." and she hung on to me, and he said, "Mother, you can come too." So they took me to the cockpit. I talked to the pilots, and he explained to me about the apparatus. And so I met the cockpit, I met the co-pilot and navigator. And when he announced that there were engine trouble, I saw the co-pilot was red in his face, and a sergeant who was running back and forth, he was pale in his face, and the co-pilot was looking through the little windows. I wondered what he was looking with his flashlight, because it was dark. And later on, I questioned a lady why he was looking through the little bull windows. He said, well, he did because they were letting off gasoline over the ocean. The plane was already 3 hours, 1.5 hours over the ocean, and they wanted to see if the plane caught fire or so when they released gasoline. So half and a half hour, 1.5 hours going to the States, and 1.5 hours back. We lost 3 hours, and I promised if we land safely, I will not enter into that plane. But after several hours, they called my name first, because I had a little child, so I had to enter first. I had no choice. But since we lost so much time, we fell asleep, and then the next morning, the sun was shining. We were way above the clouds. It looked beautiful, and I felt great. And then we landed in McGuire Air Force Base, and then we were taken by a shuttle bus to Philadelphia. Oh my, for the first time I saw for Philadelphia at night, Philadelphia city, it was just an ocean of light. It was so beautiful, unbelievable. And yeah, and then in El Paso, Texas, we were stationed in El Paso, Texas. So my husband waited at the airport for me at the station. And while we were in the plane from Philadelphia to El Paso, one time the plane couldn't land in one place because it was snowing. And see, the planes were not that advanced like they are today. And so, and one stewardess, she didn't have a watch, and she asked if she could borrow my watch for a while. I said, sure. And when I deplaned in El Paso, I forgot about the watch, and all of a sudden, as I deplaned, she came running to me to give me the watch back. And my husband was there, and it was snowing when we landed in El Paso. That was the only day that we had snow in El Paso when I landed. So that was in 1962. That was really quite an experience.
Are any of your siblings alive?
No, my brother is dead now, and my sister, she's in nursing home for 1 year now. She's 91, and but the other sister is still alive. And my mother was 98 when she died. She died in 2008. In 2007, in October, she was born a day before my birthday. So she always wanted me to celebrate birthday with her. So many times in October, I would go and visit her because she always wanted me to be with her. And one time she paid me money to come and celebrate. So, but so far only a niece came to visit us. Oh, yeah, the younger sister one time she took a trip through the states, but with a travel agency, and we didn't see each other because we were in the meantime in Missouri, and they drove through Texas and Las Vegas, Nevada, and so we didn't see each other. But hopefully someday she'll come before I pass away. My time is limited now. I turned 90 only on the 16th.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Yes?
I'm 90. I'm really impressed with you standing up there
Oh,
and talking to us. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yes.
well, yeah, God bless me still that I'm able to walk still and have my faculties fairly together, although I'm very forgetful too. You also had a question? Yeah?
I don't know, I don't.
No, okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming. And if you have any questions, the presentation's finished, but you can come up and ask anything else that you'd like. So thank you very much.
Thank you.